When I was in the 3rd grade, my dad bought me my first Bible. In the front pages, he wrote what he called random quotes and thoughts to keep a proper perspective on life. One of the quotes he chose to write for me was one by Jim Elliot, and it reads, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." What a proper perspective on life that he lived by. This perspective, I believe, Psalm 90 shares as well in verse 12, saying, "So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom." When we come to understand that our lives are numbered on this earth and we are but pilgrims passing through, it changes how we live. We live giving our life to and for Jesus and gaining his life in us. We live with a proper perspective on life, discerning the temporary and the permanent. You see, Jim Elliot wrote this in 1949, and 7 years later, he was martyred, sharing the gospel to the Auca Indians. After more than 50 years since his death, no one talks about the things he couldn't keep. No one talks about the things he had. No one talks about the clothes he wore. No one talks about the car he drove. No one talks about the house he had. No one talks about his financial success. And no one talks about his social status, if you fit in or not. We talk about his words he wrote. We talk about how he was faithful in serving the Lord. We talk about his passion for the gospel to be shared with everybody. We talk about how he lived his life for Christ as a pilgrim in the world. We remember how Jim Elliot was no fool and gave up what he couldn't keep to gain what he couldn't lose. So let Psalm 90 verse 12 be our prayer. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. At the end of the day, no one's going to remember those temporary things, but the way you lived for Christ and exalted his name in your life.